Um, Hooked up.
Bagpipes.
Excuse me?
Bagpipes.
Bagpipe, yeah. Okay. All right, you have to go away. Stand over here. Okay, you can listen. A bagpipe is impervious to Midrash Tumah regarding a trough of Puzonis. Beit Shammai says it is susceptible to Midrash Tumah, but Beis Hillel says it is only susceptible to becoming tummy with corpse Tumah. Regarding a trough with a capacity of between 2 logs and 9 calves that cracked, it is susceptible to becoming tummy with Midrash Tumah. If one left it in the rain and it swelled, it is susceptible to becoming tummy with corpse Tumah. If he then placed it in the east wind and it developed a crack, it is susceptible to Midrash Tumah. This is the stringency that applies to the remnant of wooden utensils over the original utensil, and the stringency that applies to remnants of wicker utensils over the original utensil is that over the original utensil is that originally they are not susceptible to tumah until their time are secured. Rims are secured. No. But after their rims are secured, even though their rims fell away, if only the smallest amount of the rim remains, they are tameh. Regarding a stick that one made into a handle for an axe, it is considered connected with regard to tumah while in use. Regarding a distar, it is considered connected with regard to tumah while in use. If one set it into a post, it is tameh, but it is not considered connected to the post. If one made it into a distar,
It's the post into a deer star.
only that part which it needs is tameh. Regarding a chair that one set into a post, it is tameh, but it is not considered connected to it. If one made a chair, only its place is tameh. If he attached to the beam of an olive press, it is tameh, but it is not considered connected to it. If one made a chair at the top of the beam, it is tahor because people say to him, "Stand up so that we may do our work." Regarding a large trough that was too damaged to hold pomegranates and one prepared to sit on it, Rabbi Akiva rules it tameh. But the sages rule tameh until one cuts it. If he made it into a manger, even if he set it into a wall, it is tameh. Okay, good.
Right. So, Mishna Hey begins with the case of a kofes. A kofes, this block over here, the block itself must originally have been susceptible to Midrash Tumah for this to be relevant. So we're starting out with a block that was already made for people to sit on.
Okay.
And now the builder came and said, this block looks useful. Okay, so he takes the block, and he stuck it into the wall. Right, he's building a wall, and he puts this block into the bricks, among the bricks. Okay, Kavao, if he fixed it in place, so now he's actually like nailed it in place or cemented it in place, whatever it is, but he hasn't put another row of bricks on top of it. Okay, all that's happened over here is that he has taken an object that was previously susceptible to midrash and stuck it on top of a wall. Now, the Azav or anyone could come and still sit on top of this block because it's on top of the wall. So he hasn't completely removed its function from it, and it is still considered like something that was like a kli. Remember in the previous Mishnah we were talking about the trough that was it was a trough before. He nailed it to the wall. It doesn't lose its susceptibility to tumah just because it was nailed to the wall now, because it's still just a trough that's nailed to the wall. It's not actually part of the structure. And then it's the same thing in this case over here, where you've got this block that's now just been nailed on top of the wall. Alternatively, if he built on top of it, so let's say he just placed it gently in place and started putting bricks on top of it. It could be that he's using it as a placeholder just to rest the bricks until the cement sets, and he wants to take it out to leave a gap, which means he's just using it as a placeholder. So that also has not removed its tumah because he hasn't demonstrated intent to leave it inside the wall. So in either of these cases, it's still tameh. Kava'o bana alav tahor. But if he actually cemented it in place and built on top of it, that's shown his intent that this is part of the building materials. It's no longer usable as a seat, and it's now mechuber lekarka. It has lost its original function, and it's tahor. Okay. So it's a similar case over here with a reed mat. Al gabe hakoros. So he took this reed mat. It was originally designated for sitting on, which means it's susceptible to midrash tumah, and let's say it's even tameh. Okay. Al gabe hakoros. Kava overlonatan labis amazeva. So he put it on top. It's a useful thing to put on a ceiling because it's nice and wide, and then you can start putting cement on top of it or something like that. So if he fixed it in place, but he hasn't put the plaster on top of it, or alternatively, or he put the plaster on it and he hasn't fixed it in place, just like with the bricks, it hasn't lost its susceptibility for the same reason in both cases as the bricks in the previous case, and it remains tame. However, if he fixed it in place and plastered over it, that demonstrates clearly that it's now part of the ceiling and it's now tahor. Ke'ara. Now you've got a plate that was attached to a bin. Okay, a bin, a chest, or a cabinet, a migdal. Okay. Now, kederech kabbalasa, if he puts it with the receptacle upwards, then it's still usable as a receptacle. And all that he's done is he's taken a plate and fixed it onto something else, and it's still usable as a plate. It retains its tumah. However, if he inverts it so that it's no longer usable as a plate and it's now fixed in place, it's lost its original function. It's fixed to the cabinet, and now it's just a lid or whatever. And again, it loses its tumah. Okay, all good. You got the principles. So. The important thing is the principles over here. Like the specific cases are not as important as understanding the principle of what's happening over here. Is that it was a kli, it was something that was originally susceptible to tumah. You try using it as a building material. It only works as a building material once it has been firmly and irrevocably made part of the building. Okay. If it's still usable in its original form, or if it can still be removed from the building because it's not been properly fixed in place, then it remains tameh. Okay. Another thing that is shifting forms of tumah. So we're talking here about a sardin is a sheet, which of course is susceptible to midras tumah because people sleep on it. Okay. Now tameh midras. Okay, so it is already tameh because the Zab already slept on it. And now he decides that he wants to take it and convert it into a curtain. Now, curtain is not susceptible to midras because people don't sleep on curtains. Okay, so taho mina midras. So it loses its midras tumah altogether. Aval tameh meis. It is nonetheless susceptible to meis tumah because it's a piece of fabric, and just like all other pieces of fabric, it can receive regular tumah, regular meis tumah. Okay, so from what point does it lose its susceptibility to midras tumah? Okay, during its conversion from a sheet to a curtain. Beis Shammai omrim mi sheyitaver, that's from when it's broken. In other words, at the point that it has been cut down to size and put into the place of the window. Okay. No, it doesn't have to be that long. The Beis Hillel is more lenient. When one inserts and ties onto the sheet the loops from which it'll hang, that's the moment that it loses its susceptible to midras tumah. Because then okay, Rabbi Akiva takes a middle point, misha ikaveya. This is not so there are three stages. One, you tie on the loops so that you can hang it. Two is where you hang it up on the window, and three is when you cut it down to size, because the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to hang it up in place, measure it, and then cut it. So Beis Hillel take the most lenient position that as soon as you put the loops on, it's now a curtain. And Rabbi Akiva says it's in the middle stage when you've actually hung it from those loops. That's when it becomes a curtain. And Beis Shammai say no, not until it's been cut down to size. Okay. Now this machatzeles is the mat. So typically this mat is something that somebody will sleep on, and therefore it's subject to midras tumah. Okay, but a mat, in order for somebody to sleep on it, has got to be comfortable. Okay, so now we say machatzeles she'asa la kinim leorka. So first of all, the main diagram on 925 shows you what a regular mat looks like. Okay, and that's and you see it's mostly soft reeds, but it's reinforced with these thick reeds, the darker ones that go across the width like that. Okay. And it's tied with those knots at the end to make sure that the reeds don't start coming apart. Okay, so that's the important thing. We're concerned, and specifically along that length piece that we have those knots, because that's where it's most likely to start shredding, and now. So that's the one that picture over there on 925. That's the one that everyone agrees is the Tame one, is the Tame Midras. So Tanakama, probably Rabbi Meir, says that if it's got reeds across its down its length, that's tahor. So in other words, in the opposite direction to where it's shown on this diagram, because that makes it uncomfortable for people to sleep on. Okay, and the Chachamim disagree and say that's not so uncomfortable. You can just shift yourself into the gaps in between.
I'm getting confused. Are we doing the one that's uncomfortable is the one according to the Rambam?
We haven't reached there yet. We're about to now. There's no diagram of the Tanakama's one.
Okay, all right.
Okay, just imagine that instead of the lines being vertical over here, the lines are now horizontal going across the length.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and that's what the Tanakama is talking about. He's saying that's no longer midras. It's in other words, it's tower completely, in fact, because it must have been designed for shade, and a reed mat that's made for shade is not tamei at all. Okay, Chachamim omrim ad she'ya'aseh min ki. So it's not tahor unless the reinforcement reeds are made like a key. Now the Greek letter key, we've seen before. I thought it was obvious that it was the X, right? That's the key, and we saw that actually in Menachos when we were making one of the flour offerings gets baked into pieces of bread, and then you draw a key on with oil, and there we explained that it was like an X letter. But over here it seems to be there's some strong opinions, and I'm not going to start saying like what are they that they've gone crazy, but they're saying that it's like a chet or like a kaf, with that sort of three-way thing that make either way. The intention is that it makes it very difficult to sleep on, because that will be uncomfortable to sleep on. Okay, so that's the opinion of the Chachamim, that it does that's the only thing that will make it impervious to Tumah. And I also just thought that the Rambam's one also just makes more sense, because normally a sleeping mat is one that you'll be able to roll up easily and carry around with you. So in both of the other cases, you're able to roll it up easily. But in this case over here, if you've got your reinforcement in an X, there's no way you're going to be able to roll it up. So it's not very practical at all for carrying around with you. And I'm sure it would be for shade, which means less so in the case of the key over here, but maybe also. Anyway, without sticking my head in between the two mountains over there, let's move back into the Mishnah. Asa'am lerochbav ein bein kane lechavero arba'at tvachim. So if you place the reed stalks along the mat's width, so just like in our original diagram, but you don't have 4 tvachim between the reeds, in other words, between the reinforcements, that's also that everyone agrees is tahor, because again, it's going to be too hard to lie on it. Now, what happens if you had this original reed mat? Nechleka lerochba. So it was split in half along the width, like this diagram on 928. Okay. Now that's got you're left with 2 usable halves of reed mat. Even though down the middle it doesn't have the reinforcing knots, there's less of a concern that it's going to break down this. But there's nonetheless we see it's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says it's tahor because now you've got some loose ends in the middle, and they're going to start unraveling, and therefore he says this is already going to become it's going to be tahor because it's going to unravel. Chachamim disagree. They say this is still tameh. If somebody unties the ends of the mat, so it's no longer being held together by the knots, then even though the Chachamim will agree that this is completely tahor, because now it's untied on both ends. It's much more liable to fray and start disintegrating, and therefore it is tahor. Now, what happens if it's broken on, like the diagram on the left, on 929? So that's in no danger of coming apart, because it's like also the reeds that are in the reinforcement reeds have also been broken, but the weave is not going to come apart because the knots are still in place. So all that's in question now is whether it's the requisite minimum size for sitting on, and the answer here is, so what's that minimum size? It needs to have basically 3 end knots that make 6 tfachim, and if that still remains, then it's tameh. Okay. So the question now we quickly ask is, in the manufacture of one of these mats, from what point in its manufacture does it become susceptible to tumah? From the moment that it is trimmed, because obviously, like the reed baskets that we saw before, they're going to be loose ends. It needs to be trimmed, and that is the end of its manufacture, is when the loose ends have been trimmed. Okay.
Okay. Yud Zayin and Yud Zayin. The base of smith is tamor, but that of a blacksmith is tahor. And the sharpening board that is receptacle for holding oil is tameh, but a sharpening board that does not have a receptacle is tahor. A ledger that has a receptacle for holding wax is tameh, but a ledger that doesn't have a receptacle is tahor. Regarding a straw mat or a straw tube, Rabbi Akiva uses tameh, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri uses tahor. Rabbi Shimon said the same applies to called a seed. A mat of reeds is said is tahor. A reed tube that was cut for the purpose of being used as a receptacle is tahor until one removes all of its pit. Regarding a bin, Beit Shammai says it is measured from its interior, but Beis Hillel says it is measured from its exterior. Both agree that the thickness of the legs and the thickness of the rims are not measured. Rabbi Yoshi says they agree that the thickness of the legs and the thickness of the rims are measured, but the rims between the legs is not measured. And Shimon Sasuri says if the legs were one handbreadth high, and then the area between them is not measured, but if not, the area between them is measured. It is not.
Regarding the wheel.
I did, yeah. Regarding a wheel, which is removable, when it is not connected to the bin, it must be measured together with the bin. If it does not,
it is not measured together with the bin.
Right. If it is not measured together with the bin, it is not protected against tumor together with the bin when they are at overhead over a corpse, or we may not drag it on the Shabbat when there is money inside it. But if the wheel is not removable, it is considered connected to the bin. It is measured together with the bin, and it protects against tumor together with the bin when they are as an ohel over a corpse, or we may drag it on Shabbos even though there is money inside. Regarding its cover, when it is permanently set, it is considered connected to the bin and is measured together with the bin. But if it is not permanently set, it is not considered connected to the bin and is not measured together with the bin. However, how is it measured? Excuse me. And how is it measured? By drawing a diagonal line. And Yehuda says, if the bin cannot stand by itself, it's tahor.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Ches Aleph. Regarding an oven that one partition with boards or with curtains, if the sheret is found in one compartment, everything is tameh. Regarding a talmud's basket plugged up with straw and hanging onto the airspace of the oven, if a sheret is in the basket, the oven is tameh. If the sheret is in the oven, any food that is inside the basket is tameh. But Rabbi Eliezer rules a tahor. If Eliezer said if the potato affords protection in the more severe case of a corpse, should it not afford protection in the more lenient case of an earthenware utensil? They said to him, if it affords protection in the more severe case of a corpse, that is because we can divide tents. We should then afford protection in the more lenient case of an earthenware utensil, given that we cannot divide an earthenware utensil. Oh boy. If it was whole, it's and so too a box, and so too a flask. If the sheretz is in the container, the oven is tahor. And if the sheretz is in the oven, food is in the container is tahor. If they develop the whole, that which was intended for food is measured with olives, and that which was intended for liquids is measured with liquids. But that which was intended for both, we apply it to a more stringent measure. That is enough to take in liquid. Regarding a sereda that was placed on the mouth of an oven and it sinks into it and has no rim, if a sheretz is in the sedra, and the oven is tamei. If the sheretz is in the oven, food that is in the sedra is tamei, but only utensils protect from the tumei oven earthenware utensil. Regarding a barrel that is full of tahor beverages and is placed beneath the floor of an oven, if the sheretz is in the oven, the barrel and the beverage are tahor, and if the barrel was inverted and its mouth open to the airspace of the oven, if the sheretz is in the oven, beverage sufficient to moisten that is on the bottom of the barrel is tahor.
Okay.
Okay. Whether one consecrates his property or one vows his own eric, if he has nothing of his wife's clothing or of children's clothing, or if he dyed garments that he dyed for them, or of the new shoes that he bought for them. Although they said slaves are sold with a garment to enhance their value, for clothing is purchased for him for 30 dinners, his value increases a mana. And so it is with a cow. If they hold it until the market day, its value increases, and so it is with a pearl. If they bring it up on to a large city, its value increases. The temple measuring has only its place and its time. One does not concentrate ancestral land less than 2 years before the Yovel, nor does one redeem it less than a year after the Yovel. We do not reckon months in respect to the temple treasury, but the temple treasury reckons months. If one consecrates his field at the time of Yovel, he gives it for an area of which is a comer of a barley may be sown. A comer of barley may be sown 50 silver shekels. If there were clefts 10 tefachim drop deep, there or rocks 10 tefachim high, they are not measured with it, and if they are less than that, they are measured with it. If he consecrated it 2 or 3 years before the Yovel, he gives a seller and a punyan per year. If he said, I will give the amount for each year, in that year we pay him no heed, and we must give it to all at once. This applies to both the owner and any other person. What is the difference between the owner and any other person? Only that the owner gives an additional fifth, whereas any other person does not give a fifth.
Okay. All right, Makos.
I'll accept. Just as the testimony of two is void, if the testimony of two is void, if one of them is a relative or ineligible, so is the testimony of 3 void if one of them is a relative or ineligible. How do we know that this is so even of 100? Because the Torah says witnesses. Rav Yoshi says this is only so in capital cases, but in monetary suits, the evidence can be sustained by the rest. Rabbi says it applies like a monetary suit, and in capital cases, that if they warn them, but if they not warn them, it does not. It does not. If 2 saw from one window and 2 from another window, and one in the middle warned them, and then if some should see for the others, they are counted as a single body of testimony. But if not, they cannot be counted 2 bodies of testimony. Hence, if one set of witnesses found to be a Zolomim, he and the other are put to death, and the second is exempt. When Joshi says none may be put to death unless he has been warned by 2 witnesses, as it is written by the mouth of 2 witnesses. Another interpretation by the mouth of 2 witnesses that the Sanhedrin shall not hear from the mouth of an interpreter. And if a person fled after having been sentenced and he came again before the same court, his sentence is not voided. Whereas 2 stand up and declare, we testify that A was sentenced to death by such and such a court, and B and C were witnesses. A is executed. The Sanhedrin has jurisdiction in Eretz Yisrael and outside it. The Sanhedrin that carries out an execution once in 7 years is called destructive. But Eliezer ben Arya says once in 70 years. But Tafit Kiva says if we have been members of the Sanhedrin, no one would have ever been put to death. Rabbi Gamil said there would indeed have increased shedders of blood in Israel.
Okay, we're gonna have to stop there. You can do the rest of the chazars yourself, but I'm gonna run.